Politicons Book 2, written by Oliver Arnold and narrated by Adam 11 Labs. Chapter 5. On the island, deep within the rainforest, nothing but the faint rustle of nature brushed through the air. That and the curses of Youruppean Terence Tweet. He knelt in the thicket, his tie undone and dangling from a stick in front of him as the Youruppean balanced twigs around the tie's slope to build a snare. After repeatedly failing to set the trap, he paused and breathed deeply, with an apparent effort to keep his cool. A sudden snap in the brush made him turn. There, a lightly treading figure equipped with a spear and a jute bag emerged. It was Tweet's colleague, Josine Mackerel. Unhurried, she made her way toward Tweet, glancing left and right as she strode, parting bushes and weeds with a sharpened walking stick she held. When she spotted a reishi, she speared it to then retrieve and smell the fungus before storing it away in her bag. She smiled at Tweet. "Are you going to kill me now?" Tweet said, beaming at the surprise visitor. Mackerel's eyes wandered over Tweet's trap and she grinned. "Only if you ensnarl me. How have you been?" "Fine, thank you." Tweet rose cautiously, trying to hide a ridiculous bit of nervousness. "I've been collecting mushrooms and grubs. Would you like one?" Mackerel asked. She produced a fungus and held it out. Tweet hesitated, then took the offering. After smelling it, he smiled, studying Mackerel. "Go ahead, try it," she said, nodding encouragingly. Tweet took a bite, his eyes never leaving hers as he chewed. "Pretty good," he finally said, gesturing approval. "When I was young, I often went mushroom picking with my parents," Mackerel said, sitting down next to Tweet's trap and then casually toppling the useless pile of twigs. "If only I possessed survival skills," said Tweet. "Could you point me to the nearest golf course? I know a lot about that." They laughed. "What mess did we get into this time?" Mackerel asked pensively. "At least we don't have to campaign anymore," said Tweet. "A positive spin, as is your habit." "I'm surprised to see you here." "Are you? It seems like the order here. A global event, so to say," Mackerel remarked while eyeing a large beetle clumsily crawling about the forest floor. "Do you think we'll be rescued?" asked Tweet. "Rescued? By whom? I think we'll have to see this social experiment through." She moved her hand over the beetle and closed her fingers. "Perhaps you are right. We should welcome the challenge." "Yes. Strive for our best," Mackerel replied, while casually plucking the beetle's legs, disabling it. "I'm at an age where I take life as it happens. Good or bad, it's all part of the experience," Tweet said as a speck of dust landed on his suit. He flicked it off. Mackerel nodded as she placed the disabled beetle in her bag. "What are you planning to do next?" "I was hoping to build a shelter," Tweet said, shrugging. "Good idea. Stay in one place. Whatever it is I'll encounter..." "You don't run from nothing." "Maybe not, but I'm also not moving toward anything." "How can we bring the group together?" "You mean all the polis on this island? Do you think we can hope to do that? What if we fail?" "I hope we can avoid supremacy wars." "Maybe it's best if none of us return to the world outside. It would be an all right place without us." "I'd rather return and stay. I've got my new Dwemer iron to play with." Tweet nodded pensively. "Do you think the GM is dealing with the rebellion?" "I don't know," said Mackerel. "Should we be doing anything at all?" asked Tweet. "Maybe the GM wants us to make our own decisions and be independent." "Such has never been the GM's way." "No, it has not. What if the GM is one of us, and is now here?" "That is a possibility." "What if the GM is not one person? It could be a network of people, generations of individuals, even masked as one." "But we're the highest level of government. What are you saying, that there's a level of governments above us?" "I'm not sure," said Tweet. "I always thought of the GM more as an advisor. Sure, he or she commands us, but no one has resisted. What happens to anyone resisting the GM?" "I don't know. I don't recall anyone in these memory doing that. The GM calls the shots. That's how it's always been. The thought of challenging the GM is not on many people's minds anymore." Tweet nodded. "There has been talk of a few countries breaking away from the GM's grasp in Eurasia." "Yes, I heard about that. They were quickly annihilated, and he said it. But the GM never claimed responsibility."
Was put off as a local type of war, I think.
I don't know what to make of it. I think if, in fact, the GM had intervened there, he did it in the wisest way, not getting associated with the destruction, yet leaving the possibility very much open. Mackerel nodded and pondered for a while. Then she said,
Do you think our society is unfair?
At this, Tweet turned pensive for a moment and said, It is if you view it from our executive standpoint. Sure, we live in luxury and privilege, yet the inhabitants on the lower levels don't know any other way of life. They dwell the way they always have. You wouldn't challenge how an animal lives in nature, would you?
Maybe not an entirely valid comparison.
Mackerel smiled.
You may be too much of a poly and too little of a philosopher.
After a moment of silence, Tweet said, What is your earliest memory of the GM?
I recall my father telling me about the GM after being initiated. This was unusual, as normal people wouldn't know about the mischievous woman.
You believe the GM is a lady? At this, Mackerel laughed.
Perhaps neither.
How do you mean?
Not sure, Terence.
She quieted. But the GM has afforded us so much. But why only us?
The GM always knows what's best.
Should there be a rebellion against it?
Don't say such things out aloud. Perhaps GM is an intelligence far beyond ours, and with infinite resources. The anonymity is smart. No geographical location, multiple languages, without accent, no physical presence, just a voice.
We will not reach conciliation on this one, I fear.
It is impossible. The word is not ours to change.
Tweet allowed a beat of silence and then spoke. Why don't we collaborate? He handed her his machete. Here is a token of goodwill. Mackerel contemplated the blade.
What is your proposal?
My strength and your smarts should get us through a week or two. Mackerel nodded.
We could run alternating watches at night.
Indeed. She held up her hand. Tweet took it, and they shook. Where should we build our encampment? Asked Tweet.
Show me what you had in mind,
Mackerel said, taking his arm. They strode through the jungle for about 20 minutes before reaching a rocky hillside that fell sharply off at the rear, with cliffs and the open ocean protecting it. Tweet strode toward an impenetrable stretch of rock, then pointed to a crack that, on second glance, was an opening to a cave. The two entered, and the tall Tweet had to duck to fit into the dark, smelly cavern. Mackerel wrinkled her nose. I was planning to open up a passage to allow more light and air in, Tweet said, pointing at a spot in the rear upper wall. It would also serve as an emergency exit. The upper platform could be used as a lookout and for tanning. Mackerel smiled and shook her head.
I don't think we can open all that up.
We could ask the GM for assistance, Tweet said, but then touched his chin pensively. Or the Lord. Whom do you usually ask first?
It depends on the nature of the request. Often I find technical queries more readily answered by the GM.
She ran her hand along the rock. It came back wet and slimy.
This place is very dark and damp.
Mackerel reached into a crevice and pulled out a dark mass. And full of bats, she said, holding up the evidence, a fat, hairy vampire bat. She slammed the beast on a rock and tossed it into her bag.
But what about the GM's all-important threshold? Remember, she told us about that in the meeting.
Tweet didn't have a good answer. Perhaps the GM finds pleasure in our struggle?
I do not think that she ever amuses herself this way. She pursues gourds and us on this island. How can that possibly be part of a plan?
Tweet thought for a moment. Perhaps the calculations were wrong. Mackerel gasped and stopped cold, then continued whispering.
Don't you ever say that, Terence. Ever say that again.
Tweet remained cool. Why? I doubt the GM is in this cave. If he were, why isn't he instructing us? Perhaps the GM has been overcome. They returned to the outside. The sun had by now risen to a high noon and shone crisply through openings in the canopy. The air hung low, though, with heat. Tweet and M. Mackerel, coming from the cool cave, broke into a sweat. I like that we agree to disagree, said Tweet finally.
Yet not. If you disagree, agreeably,
Mackerel said with a smirk. Tweet nodded, and they took in the scenery for a moment. We've achieved so much this morning, not literally, but figuratively.
And that's what matters.
She grabbed Tweet by the arm.
Let me show you a different spot. You tell me what you think,
Mackerel finally said. As they walked off, Tweet added, I'm glad you're unattractive, allowing us to continue on a purely professional level. Mackerel nodded.
And I like that you a dark guy who won't steal my purse.
You heard the 5th chapter of Politicons, Book 2, written by Oliver Arnold.